Hey everybody, welcome to Adam Makes Beer. My name's Adam. This is our second live stream. I'm really excited about this one. Tonight we're going to be talking with a dear friend of mine, Rockne Van Meter. He's brewmaster at Redwood Brewing in Michigan. Um, but before that, just a few quick notes off the top. Just recently, I think within the last week and a half, we hit 1,000 subs on the YouTube channel, which is absolutely crazy to me. Through my singular search on Google, I saw one response. In general, it takes about 22 months, almost 2 years, to get to 1,000 subs on YouTube. So that's very humbling, and to be honest, it's super motivational. My hope with all this stuff is to get you guys as much quality content as I can, and yeah, and I've really been enjoying doing it. So it's really been fantastic. We want to keep pushing on toward 2,000 and on the way up. So honestly, I feel like every time I give everybody a shout and tell them to share the channel with your home brewing buddies, with other people that know that you love other people that you know that love beer and the brewing process. Send the link their way, man. And we're really looking to try to find, I don't know, exactly what you guys are looking for content wise and everything like that. We have a lot of great stuff coming up. I did the Q&A live stream a few weeks back, which was a lot of fun. It was a good chance to engage with all of you. And this week is this tonight is the first time I'm having another pro on to talk beer with. And this is kind of the thing that I'm hoping to kind of build on, kind of tap into some of the resources that I have in the industry and some of the friends that I've made over the years. And my man Rockne Van Meter is the prime example of that. Let me give you a little rundown on Rock. Rock started brewing professionally in 2002. One of the things that always blows me away is Rockne's won, it's over a dozen, and he'll say he might not know. I don't know what you'll say, but you've won over a dozen awards at World Beer Cup and GABF, which is quite frankly the big ones right there. Two massive competitions, and that includes Brewer of the Year, I believe, in 2014, Rockne,
Yeah, 2014.
when you were with
2014.
Bastogne, and yeah, just heavily decorated. And one of the things I've enjoyed over the years is Rock's a diligent dude. He's about learning and growing within this craft, within this trade, however you want to put it. We always have a good time talking beer. So, Rock, welcome to the live stream, man. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing
Good to
really
see you.
good, dude. I like your setup. I like that I'm jealous of the cigar currently. I am inside the
Yeah,
house. But you
yeah,
got a good thing going on over there, buddy.
I do. Yeah, we have like a cedar room. Call it our fun room. My wife named it a fun room when we got here because it's just like
Yeah,
this 15 by 15 square foot room.
sure.
So I got the window open and a fan going because I don't smoke cigars in the house. That'd be crazy.
That's a little
We-
rough.
We're
Yeah,
not smoking house except for cigars. So I mean, it
yeah,
wouldn't make
absolutely.
sense.
Absolutely. Well, I'm super excited to be talking to you. You were just up here, well, down here recently, and we had a chance to I basically tasted you through my whole lineup of what we have going on at Cartridge. Um, and that's always fun. One of the things I always like with that, I like getting other people's opinions, and especially it doesn't have to be a pro brewer thing, but just people that really are interested in thinking critically about your beer. Like it is nice when somebody's drinking your beer and they're like, "Oh, this is awesome," or whatever. That's always great. But I don't know, it's different when you actually just sit down and can have that conversation with somebody that actually wants to drink the beer critically, right?
Yeah, whenever you're at the brewery, I think for me, when people come up and like, "Oh, this tastes great," or it tastes whatever, it always seems kind of I don't want to say fake, but it just seems like it's placating as opposed, because I don't necessarily believe it. Like I'll make a beer and I see the flaws just as you do. You know that
Sure.
it's never perfect because
Sure.
it's just never perfect, unfortunately. So, so I guess it's interesting to be like, the guy behind the curtain that knows that that's wrong or that's wrong. But so it's hard to take it seriously or to heart. I don't know which one is the right word, but it is kind of hard
Sure.
to take the compliments because it's just, I don't know. I feel that you and I both know that our beers are never perfect. So I'm
Well,
glad that they like them.
sure. And I think
That's
it speaks
fantastic. But
I think it speaks to kind of the bigger thing. I went down, my wife and I went down to Austin a couple months back, and I was dying to get to Austin Beer Garden. And I had their industry pills there. I think they have a handful of Pilsners, maybe one IPA. It's pretty awesome. Dude, that industry pills, so many of my brewing buddies have told me I had to drink that beer. Man, I had a pint of that, and it was like the perfect everything. It was like first day of vacation, a really killer beer, right? And then I'm there with
right.
my wife. The weather's gorgeous. Like it's a perfect beer, right?
Yeah,
And you're like
absolutely.
you need to go back. You need to go back and have it again. And we did go back later in the week, and it was still awesome, but it wasn't what I remembered in my head either. And I think
Yeah,
really, and that's no knock on what Austin Beer Garden has.
sure.
They have tremendous beer. Again, I mean, the walls there are the rafters there are sagging with the medals they've won for those beers. But it really is. It speaks to how much of the overall experience somebody has with the beer. You know what I mean? Whether it's
Yeah.
ambiance, whether it's people that they're with, and everything like that. Kind of speaking to that a little bit, like I know you. I mean, in my mind, and I know you've kind of run the whole spectrum, but I know you have smashed pretty hard historically with Belgian beers and in competition. I mean, was Belgian beer your thing when you started getting into brewing?
No, German Hefeweizen and German lagers were my thing. I only brewed at home as a home brewer for, I wouldn't even say a year, but I probably brewed like 5 times a week. I would just brew it just to go through the process, and then I just dump it because I didn't have enough carboys. I had like 14 or 15 carboys, a bunch of, you know what I mean? I would just do it and go, this wasn't exactly perfect, throw it down the drain and
Exactly
make
perfect from
another
a
one.
process standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, because I wouldn't ferment or anything. I would just do that. I would I would make it, right? And I'm going for like, let's say a 1056 is 1054. I'm like, I'm not doing this. So I would I would throw it away. And I
You
mean, I did that all the time.
you've
But
never
no, that
told me
wasn't.
this. That's
Oh yeah, yeah,
fantastic. Just real quick, I can't believe.
yeah,
Well, first of all, it also it makes sense as well. So for you, especially that at that point, I mean, it was really a process game, right? Like for
yeah.
what was it that like, okay, you're gonna do the process, and unless the process is done flawlessly, you're not actually gonna go through with the fermentation on it because you're wasting time.
Yeah, because the end result isn't going to be what I want it to be to begin with. So what am I doing? Wasting my time. I'll just start over and do it again. When I get it right, we'll see what happens.
Dude, that's
I mean, that wasn't
sensational.
every time.
Sure.
Well, it didn't. It wasn't like the every time. I mean, I got to a point where I'm like, well, I'm running out of beer to drink, so I might as well just see what this hack batch is. That's 3 thousandths below original gravity tastes like, or something
This
like that.
this this had me laughing. I remember when I first got into brewing, I was making a lot of small British beers, so like bitters and milds and stuff like that. And I had a buddy over to my house, and I was gonna be bottling up some beer, or whatever. And I had a carboy up on the thing, and I sampled it, and it wasn't right. Like it had like this weird fermentation character. To me, it was almost like a little bit of like old bad yeast. It was a little bit like rubbery, like meaty, weird. So I
Yeah,
sampled it, and I'm like, dude, there's no way. Why am I going to dirty all these bottles? It's not the same thing as what you did, because I went all the way through the process, and then so I just
it's not
started
much
pouring
different.
it. My buddy went to the bathroom, and then in the meantime, I just tipped it over and started pouring it in the sink. He walks out of the bathroom. He goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, I'm pouring it. He goes, well, hold on just a second. And he grabs a glass and he sticks it under it for a second and drinks it. He goes, I don't know, man. And he keeps shoving it back under.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah, I love stuff like that. I mean, because it happened all the time when you're making beer in your kitchen or in your basement or in your garage or whatever. When you're not a professional, and you can kind of get away with having bad beer and your friends. Well, bad being not what you want it to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll, it's not even carbonated in there. They're sucking it down.
Yeah.
Was it carbonated or no?
No,
It was flat and
it was
was
straight out of the
right? They're just
carboy. It
dumping
was
it. They're like,
gurgling.
whatever.
That big bubble
Yeah, see.
was tracking up in the carboy
Yeah,
as it's glugging out.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Real slow at first. Gooshes. Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, I had friends
Okay,
like that
so
too.
but yeah, so jumping back when I cut you off because I was so thrilled that you would just dump wort, cooled wort in the
Yeah.
fermenter. That's tremendous to me. So so continue from there, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So your question was Belgian beer when I started. Was that the deal? No, it was German beers. That's how I got started. Hefeweizen has always been my favorite style since craft beer for me. Since my
Sure.
experience in craft beer being Weinstefano or something like that.
Sure.
Something other than something else.
Sure.
So no, when I got to Bastogne, I had worked at Big Buck in Auburn Hills, and I had worked at Rochester Mills in Rochester Hills. So when I got to Bastogne, I had done some Belgian things, but they were just, we brewed a lot of beer. So, at the time we were brewing a decent amount of beer. So it was more like processing, just getting stuff down, and not really hammering down a certain style because we had 20 some beers on tap. So we just made it because we were flying through it. So when I got to Bastogne, they were like, make Belgian beer. And I was like, I don't even like Belgian beer. I think it tastes like crap. Like it just sucks. It's like, well, whatever. But it was my first head brewer job, So I'm like, well,
Sure.
whatever. I got to make it work. So,
Yeah.
First I learned the process of the brewery. I went from like a 12-hour brew day down to like 6.
Yeah.
And then because time is of the essence, you can't spend all day. And I had an hour drive there and back,
Sure,
on a good day.
Yeah,
So they were long
I've
days.
been
So
there. Yeah.
yeah. So you shorten your day that way. But then it was just tried to, finally, I just relented and was like, okay, I got to make Belgian beer. So I went and I just drank as much Belgian stuff, just to kind of get the concept of what Belgian was as opposed to whatever I was doing.
Sure.
And then was able to say, I like this style. I like this style. My first style that I liked was the Double. So then I was like, which Double do I like and how do I recreate that? And then over the, just hammer that one out, learn yeast strains, learn temperatures, go through different yeast strains from different companies and all that kind of stuff like that. And just kind of hammer it down or hammer it out that way. And just go style through style. For me, that was what I did at Bastogne until it became, after 15 years there, it was, that's how it kind of flew by. Because it was, and I learned to actually, they were my favorite beer style for a long, long time. And I'm glad now that I can get back to doing German stuff because that's the reason why I started brewing in the first place. So it feels like I've been on a long vacation, learned some stuff. Hopefully I can use it towards doing German beer, but it's really, besides process, it's not the same.
Sure.
It's just not the same.
Yeah, and talk to me about that. How isn't it the same?
Well, with Belgian stuff, to me anyway, it's not, I don't want to say it's not so much about the grain, because it is, but your yeast, Belgian beer is very yeast forward.
Sure.
You could have a Pilsner malt, all Pilsner malt. You could not play with the water at all or do any pH adjustments or whatever. And you can pretty much dial in, to a point.
Sure.
With yeast strains, whether it be, a triple or a blonde or something like that. So you're playing a lot with yeast.
Mm-hmm.
And pitch rates, sure. But I wasn't counting cells at that time. For 12 years up there, I wasn't counting cells. I'd eyeball it.
Yeah.
The slurry looked like this. I'd smell it. Make sure that it was, really, that's what it was.
For
and
sure.
It was open square
For
fermenter.
sure. Yeah.
And it was very rudimentary. And I would just put it in there and see what happened. And, got into a routine of knowing that this is when it looked like this, you put in this amount. I started weighing it at the beginning,
Yeah.
And then I was just like, I got lazy. I don't want to weigh it. I just eyeballed it, and then that's kind of, to me, that's the difference between brewing Belgian for me, and only me, for brewing Belgian beers and brewing German. I feel that when I'm brewing German stuff, I feel like I have to be more precise. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I know, like with Hefeweizens, there's a pitch rate aeration issue, also a gravity issue if you want to get certain things. So you got to work with that stuff. Lagers, there's fermentation temperatures. There's, making sure you have a long enough boil to get rid of, volatiles. So it's a different kind of thing. They're more precise. It's a more honed craft for me to brew a German beer than it is to brew a Belgian beer. And maybe that's because I'm newer to the German thing, even though I've loved it my entire time. But that's just my take on it.
So my question is so having that love for German beer, having that background with Belgian beer, and then I don't know. Sometimes it trips me out that Hefeweizen is German. I don't know if that sounds weird or not, but all that yeast character, right? All that yeast character, and it's so different. But that said, to you personally, what sounds more daunting? Like really making and let's not say perfect, but like making a plus version of, right? An above average version. What's easier to make an above average version of? Hefeweizen or Helles, or insert German lager here? Do you think it's harder to do Hefeweizen than it is to do German lager?
That's like a bear trap of a question. I don't know. For me, Hefeweizen is like my favorite style. So to me, that's the one. That's my Double in the German category. I got to hammer that out because I drink it every day. Sure. So I'm going through a large learning curve with the Hefeweizen stuff. Yeah. So to me, I think the easiest one between those two for me is probably like a Helles, because I figure if it's pretty much a single grain. Right, you got a light Pilsner malt, you get a non-expressive yeast, you ferment it low, you do your rests, you filter it clear, and you carbonate it right, and voila, you should be in a decent place.
Sure.
Right? Sure. With a Hefeweizen, like I was saying, I have come to the realizations that there's like a trifecta, if not more factas, that have to do with.
Well, and talking about that yeast strain, in my experience, is so fussy. And when I say fussy, what I mean is I got the whatever is the typical. I've done very few hefs on the pro side. I've used that yeast very few times. But I got a legitimate pitch from legitimate vendor, like classic type half a strain. I pitched that thing into a reasonably sized wort, like a 1048 wort. Like it wasn't a 1070 wort or something, you know what I mean, where I could be freaking it out potentially or whatever. And I did this half, man, and my fermentation schedule, my process is pretty decent, right? And I really struggled with sulfur with it, And then the funny thing is the repitch off of it, which looked like absolute garbage. It looked like I was just kegging the beer. You know what I mean? Like it was. I'm just filling that keg, that brink, with basically just Hefeweizen. And I remember I kept looking at Josh and pointing at this. I'm like, dude, well, what is this? I'm gonna take it.
What did you do?
Pitch it. And then
blame it on Josh.
What are you doing? And but then the next one, I did a Dunkelweizen off of that. Far better ferment, way cleaner, off of a pitch that I legitimately thought just looked like maybe hazier hef. You know what I mean? Stuff like that makes me pull my hair out as far as that goes. So I think there's something to be said, and I'm not saying that there's no nuance to lager fermentation, lager brewing, all that stuff, because that's obviously not the case. But it just seems like in order to make that yeast happy, And especially like on the harvest and everything. I don't even understand how it wants to behave. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from with it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Tom Majorosi, I don't know if you heard him. He opened up, I believe he opened up Atwater when it, down in Detroit,
Okay.
up in Detroit for you.
Yeah.
He lives over in Germany. He's a brewmaster bike bomb in Mannheim. And
Okay.
I've asked him many a question about that. And he refers to that, the 3068,
Yeah.
why he says as a diva. He calls it a diva. He goes, and he said you can use it once, and that's it. And you don't know what you're going to get, really. I mean, you have an idea based on some things, but
Sure.
he says it's very finicky. So I don't know what strain you used, but for me, that strain is the strain. The Yeast 3068 is the strain that I like the best for the flavor profile that it gives. And I have found it like a 1048. I don't know what your fermentation temp was, and by no means am I some authority on brewing Hefeweizen by any stretch. But I have found that at like a 1056, I had more expressive banana.
Okay.
And I tried to just make more beer with that, so we got down like 10. I think it was 1040 or 1050, and it just tastes like a watered down version of the 10. I mean, no pun intended, but it just had the flavor profiles were quite muted.
Sure.
And then I brewed another one that was like 1052, just kind of ramping it up, by 2, and it's a little bit more expressive banana. So I think that. And they say that, the yeast purveyors and stuff, that like a higher gravity promotes higher esters and all that kind of thing too. And I'm finding that like 1056 for me is about where I get a solid amount of banana. I don't like the clove in them. I'm not the word purist when it comes like German stuff. I don't know what, if I am or not. I mean, obviously I can't be, I brew in Flint, but
Yeah.
But I like a banana bomb when it comes to Hefeweizen. I like a lot of banana character. I'm not a fan of like the clove thing. So I don't know how that really sits with, the concept of, purity when brewing the style.
Sure.
But I found that the 3068 gives me that more banana at, a 70-degree fermentation temp and 1056.
Yeah. And so are you like set it and forget it at 70? Do you ramp up or?
I do a single rest at 150, 151, something like that. Probably should go lower. I'll try that, the next few times. But about 150, 151 is a pretty standard that I've done for that, just to kind of keep that the same.
Yeah.
So just a single fusion, 151 for like 1 hour.
Yeah. Yeah, for me it was always Franziskaner. I always like that. The Dunkelweiss, that's the monk on the front, right? I believe. Well,
it totally
20 years ago when I started drinking it, that's what was on it. I don't know what's still on it now.
It still is.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Good. That's a good thing. So that's interesting. Because I mean, people say all sorts of different things. Some people say pitch cool and let it run up if you want this factor compared to this factor. Different things like that. Now, for as far as that goes, I can see oxygen post heat exchanger. So on the way to the fermenter, I can see oxygen rate within that fermentation potentially playing a role there. Is that something that you've dialed up and down, kept consistent? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have. I aerate 30% of the wort.
Okay.
And I aerate the like I have a 15-barrel system. So on that one, I'll do like a 12-barrel batch.
Yep.
So I'll knock out 12, and I will aerate barrels 5 to 2.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I don't. My thought is that I don't know. My
Tell me what your thought is.
You'll aerate the other parts of it with that little bit. Because if you aerate the first, then you're just going to push it all out as you go.
Sure.
So I figure get some aeration in there without getting any, tube or anything in there. I mean, there's not a lot of hop kit matter in there.
And I tell my people, the people I'm training, there's things that I do that are like research based. I've listened to this podcast, read this book, and this is something I'm shooting for. there's some things that are like solid in theory that I base some things on, and then there's just some things that I ask them to do because they make me feel good. Like
Yeah.
it just makes me more comfortable to know that this is happening, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'll always try to tell them like, listen, if there is I have SOPs. Here are my SOPs. Being a former teacher, it's I feel like it's a little easier making some of those things. Here's my SOPs. If you have a question about why we're doing it, dude, I will explain it all to you. And honestly, if some of the stuff does come down to my comfort level, I will also tell you that, right?
Yeah.
If you have read something, seen something, know something that you can reference, come to me and we can talk. We can change this thing for sure, right?
Yeah.
Like this thing is not in stone, right? But yeah,
No.
man, there's definitely those things where you just they're part of the process because it makes sense to you, right? And you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, it helps you sleep at night knowing that happened,
Absolutely.
and that's I mean, whatever.
Absolutely.
Even if it's wrong, I mean, obviously you wouldn't
Yeah,
do it if you think it's wrong, but
sure.
blissfully ignorant on certain things, I'm sure,
Sure. So,
or maybe not. I don't.
one of the things I've been kicking around a lot, and it was really after going again, going to Austin, and then we did a collaboration with 50 West, one of the brewers over there, Ryan. He's the brewer at the pub, really awesome guy. We actually tasted it. It was an Italian Pils that we tasted when you were down visiting Cartridge, um, and we brewed it at their place, so I feel more comfortable saying, dude, it was a really nice beer. It
It
came
was
out of
nice.
his
Yeah,
brew.
it
It
was.
came
It
out
was
of
very good. Yeah.
it came out of his brew house, so I feel more comfortable praising it like that. But
Mhm.
one of the things that I've seen with these beers that I was drinking in Austin, whether it be Live Oak, Austin Beer Garden, all these German lagers that they're making, they're actually far lower starting gravity than you kind of expect, and they finish low. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think some of their stuff is, it seems like most of their Helles and Pils type beers are 12 and under. Nobody's pushing up like they're not pushing up bigger versions of those styles necessarily, right? And these
Yeah.
beers are dry. They're dry beers, and that's something that I've been really thinking about lately when it comes to drinkability with beer. Um, Hefeweizen is an elusive one for me. So just wrapping my head around and even the balance of it, right? So how dry do you like those beers to go? Because I've definitely drank them where I feel as if they're very sweet. Where do you like that residual sweetness left in the beer for your palate when you're making that beer and you feel as if maybe it's not perfect, but you kind of have it in the range?
Right. Um. Geez, I just let the yeast go. I mean,
Sure.
I don't. I mean, I like 150 is the 150 151 is the max temp. So you're still going to have
Yeah.
some residuals. It's not like
Sure.
it's 10 or like 146 or something like
Sure.
that. So
Sure.
I do like a little body to it, and the styles of whatever that I'm doing, I try to make to like the Brewers Association type of style
Yep.
guide, right? I mean that's like the written word one. I mean I'll taste them and
Sure.
do that, but if it's going to be for a competition or something like that, if it's in a Hefeweizen, it's like a medium to full body.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sweetness, I don't know. I don't want a sweet Hefeweizen, but I think a little bit of sweetness does lend to some of the banana character in there, I guess, for lack
Yeah.
of a better,
Well, and it's like the
you know,
concept of having it's the concept of having, in my mind, residual sweetness is a magnifier in a beer, right? And so
yeah,
you can look at all these other elements of the beer, and as you dial that residual sweetness up to a certain point, they're a magnifier in a positive way, right? And then I
yeah,
think you can kind of cross the threshold and start getting too sweet, and then you actually start just hampering your ability to drink a pint or multiple pints of a beer. In
Yeah.
my mind, too high of residual sugar is kind of the thing that just stops you from being able to, I don't know, drink another beer.
I agree with you completely. The Hefeweizen thing, I deal with the dryness, if you will,
Sure.
with pH, right?
Okay. Talk to me
So
about that.
I just try to get like the mash pH to like 5.3, 5.4.
Yep. Yep.
I've read that it can be, that they're actually better at like 5.7, 5.8. I'll have to look into that more, but listening to some people on podcasts that I think we've talked about.
Sure.
Not specifically the Hefeweizen one, but the people who do that. That like even the upper ranges of pH for a Hefeweizen are beneficial. But I try to do like a 5.3, 5.5, between 5.3 and 5.4 for the mash, and then I'll adjust the pH of my sparge down to like close to 6 or 5.5 to 6, something like that.
Sure.
And then I try to get the kettle knocking out to the fermenter at about 5.1.
Yeah.
So I don't. That's just where I may be doing that for no reason. I may have no effect at all. I don't know because
There's a lot of stuff that suggests it does. Honestly, like we're dialing in. We're starting to dial in on that level of like today when we were running. We were basically we're doing an Italian Pils-ish type beer. It is going to have a small dry hop on it and everything like that. And we're kind of trying to chase this dry but bright, slightly bitter Pils type beer with a little bit more noble-esque character in the nose, stuff like that. And this is I don't do a lot of acid adjustment in the kettle. But honestly, like my team's getting so skilled oftentimes because we have distro going on and we're canning. We have a small canning line and different things like that. We have enough going on where sometimes you don't get to tick every single box that you want to process wise, right? And the nice thing is my team's like growing so rapidly. It's like, okay, hey, great. We have the labor power to make sure we're hitting all these different things. And it's great to be able to start chasing that stuff because my hunch is those great light lagers that I love drinking personally and that I want to be able to make. I do think it's some of the fine point stuff, that we're doing.
Sure.
I really do think that on when it comes to those really nailing some of those beers down, I think that water chemistry and pH do play a legitimate role. I'm also in the camp that I feel like you can probably forget who said it, but they're saying dealing with water chemistry is like the salt and pepper with a dish.
Sure.
You can make it fantastic or you can ruin it. And if people want to get into water chemistry off the top, that's great. It's something I'm starting to dabble in now, and it's not like I have a deep understanding. I kind of have like a functional understanding of what's happening there.
I thought you've been doing that for quite some. I thought you've been doing that for a bit.
Well, I've been doing that work. I started doing that back when I was brewing in Big Rapids with my buddy Andy Gallagher, who's at Linwood Brewing Concern, with my other buddy Bill Gerds. So shout out to those Linwood boys. But it was Andy that was actually working my water up then, and then we use. I still use Brewing Water. That spreadsheet. Yeah. And it was actually Andy that learned how to use that sheet, and then he implemented the water program in Big Rapids. And so then for years I would just call him. I would be like, okay, so how do I do this? And then he would tell me. And then now I'm grown up enough to where I put my pants on by myself, and I know how kind of to punch certain things in and what. So I'm more functional there.
Are you still are you still a believer, or were you a believer? What is your thought process actually? Is it ratio, or is it are you adding 300 parts per million of this, or are you doing ratio stuff? Because it's like two trains of thought, is there not?
Sure. Well, this is what I do. First of all, I have crazy water. The one time I sent John Palmer. I don't know if you're familiar with John Palmer. He wrote the water book.
Sure.
He also did How to Brew and everything.
It's a very when he speaks, he's got a lot of saliva in his mouth when he talks. He's got a lot.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, he's always swallowing when he's talking. You're like, what are you doing?
I do
He's always
know.
swallowing.
He's super smart and he's a super good dude. But I hit him up with a water question one time, and he said, he goes, this water almost doesn't make sense. It should turn instantly into scale. And I'm like, oh, it does. So anyways, we have this crazy water, and there's so much alkalinity. I use more food grade phosphoric acid than you could imagine in order to tame our pH issues there. But my kind of thought with the whole water thing is there's a couple of markers I'm trying to hit. In general, I'm trying to get 100 parts calcium. Anywhere from 50 to 100, but usually I
Sure.
try to get closer to 100. And this is kind of specifically like lagers and different things like that. The real malt forward, the legitimate malt forward beers that I'm doing, I try to make sure I get close to 100 parts per million calcium. And then really what I'm doing is I'm driving from there. I'm not looking at ratios. I do look at ratio a little bit, but I'm looking at more final numbers. With most of my lagers, I typically do push chloride, just kind of a soft round thing. But now, after checking out the Italian Pill sip trip that we did with 50 West, that pushed chloride a little bit more. I'm kind of coming to the idea that a lot of times people say that gypsum makes bitterness brighter, or it makes something more bitter, or accentuates the bitterness. I think this is the way I like to say it. I think it brings bitterness into focus. It's not like it takes it from 35 IBU to 45 IBU. I don't think that's
Right.
what it is. I think it's like looking through binoculars, right? And I think it just brings bitterness into focus a little bit more. So in general, I will try to accentuate chloride more in those beers. I usually try to get about 100 parts chloride in there, and then the remainder will be the remainder of the calcium that I need will come from my gypsum. But like with some different styles, like all the IPA stuff that I do, it's all chloride, and there's no gypsum, all chloride, and I'm putting kosher salt in the kettle.
Okay.
And I have to do that because I can't put enough chloride into the mash because I'll get too much calcium, right?
Gotcha.
So because my fear is, and I've listened to some podcasts, some guys talking on this. They'll say they don't like going over maybe 120, 125 parts calcium in those beers, because if they do, they're going to drop bright. And so what they'll do is they have to pull that chloride from somewhere else. So they're removing it from all the enzymatic activity of the mash and just going NaCl in the kettle. Obviously non-iodized, obviously, but
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah. So I'm pushing. I try to get 250 parts of chloride into my IPAs.
Okay, so
yeah.
it's up there, yeah. Do you find that when you have a solid amount of sulfate in there, does the bitterness or the hop character, does it get raggedy at all? You know what I mean? Does it get non-focused? I know you said that it's focused, but I mean when you put a lot of chloride in there, does it tend to just kind of color outside the lines with what you're trying to do?
And so
what point is it doing that?
No, exactly. So when we push up that sulfate, in that Italian pills, it puts it into focus, and it's nice and crisp and bright. But when listen, I think people make bad versions of of IPA. I know you yourself are not
No.
like a huge IPA guy, and I'm not saying anything about my IPA, anything like that. But I
Right.
think people get a little carried away. I think I think the IPAs right now, when these hazy juicy beers were first coming out, there were a couple examples that were tasty. And then people started pumping yeast slurry into cans and putting them out. But honestly, I think people's games with this have tightened up a little bit, and I feel like it's gotten better. I think there's some different balancing factors going on with IPA. It was interesting. Some of my other brewing buddies, give me crap because I did a line of cold IPAs, and that's a whole separate conversation. But
Yeah.
it was the first time where I was making IPA again that was going down to like one Plato 1004. I had big bitterness
What?
in it, and I pushed gypsum up, and it was remarkable, and it was a non London 3 type juicy strain in there. It was a clean strain. And dude, drinking that like crisp, bitter, to me, this drank more like a relatively dry West Coast style IPA. Drinking that and then drinking, the beer where we're putting the chloride forward and using the London 3 strains and doing all these, juicy type things. Dude, they're so different. You forget how crisp IPA can be and how bright IPA can be. I think though that the newer school IPA, I think they can be balanced appropriately, getting back to like what happens with all that chloride. I think that chloride just creates this roundness and this softness, right? There's really nothing as far as character malt going inside those beers. Increasingly, those beers are kind of modeled off. It seems like what Scott Janish put out in the book called The New IPA, which is for all of you, that's a killer book. If you don't have it in your library, you should. I mean, it's base malt, and then it's usually 20 to 25% combination of malted wheat and flaked oats. And functionally, those proteins in the wheat and in the oats are actually going to function as a carrier of hop oil, okay, or of hop flavor and aromatic compounds. So the point is not having a sludgy IPA, right? The volume of haze is not like the point. The haze should actually be an offshoot of process and not necessarily even bad process, which is what I used to think about in the past about it. But I do think some of those techniques are very, very useful for maximizing hop flavor and aroma. Now, some guys I know feel as if those beers get grassy. Do you feel as if have you had like one of those? Well, I mean, you're a Michigan guy. It's M43 there. That was one of the big.
That's where it comes from, man.
Yeah, for sure. So, what was your? Is that your beer?
No.
I mean, personally, okay. Do those beers get grassy
I don't.
for
I'm
you?
not an IPA guy.
Sure.
I would have no idea. I've had one. I know Travis Fritz. He's the he's
Sure.
the brewmaster, the guy.
Yeah.
Brilliant guy.
Sure.
It's not something that I can. I know nothing about what you're talking about when it comes to this stuff because I don't drink it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Sure.
The concept of what you're talking about. I listened to that book by Janish.
Yeah.
Janish, right?
Scott
Right?
Janish. Yeah.
Yeah. Very informative. And I was able to take little bits and pieces and put them in other things.
Isn't that the way
IPA,
though? Yeah.
Oh, totally. Yeah. You read whatever.
Yeah.
Piece together what you can piece together. M43, I've had a handful of times at best.
Sure.
It's not a beer that I can have a pint of. It's not my thing. I would rather. I'll have a Miller.
Sure.
Light.
Yeah. Well, and at the same time, I'm the douchebag that goes to Belgium and then has West Vleteren triple. And I'm like, that's just too phenolic. I just can't drink it.
That's okay. all right. I don't know.
Taste, man.
What I would
Honestly,
do
for
is,
me
what
though,
I would make it like this.
yeah. And the funny thing for me is with the Belgian thing, I think phenols become plastic for me so quickly. Like I have no ramp up. It's either subtle and light, or it's just like when I was little, I must have had like a tick. Like you would get there's all this ancillary plastic that came with like the toys you would buy, like all the things that would hold in the package. And I would sit in the
Yeah.
back seat and
Yeah.
like bend the plastic and trying to break it, but then it would like get hot and it would smell
Yeah.
like weird oil or plastic or something. That's what
Or like
phenol.
really old school Halloween costumes. Do you remember those? And you have like the like
It's
the
just
really old
mushed
school.
up. It's just
Yeah,
mushed up
totally.
against your face, and you're
Yeah.
breathing, and it's all the water, and it's all your saliva, essentially. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that.
Great for little kids. Yeah, for sure. No, I know what you're talking about.
Go ahead.
No, I just was saying I understand what you're talking about with those, what the phenolics and stuff like that. Unfortunately, when it comes to IPA, specific IPAs and things like that, I just don't. I don't have a knowledge behind it. It's just not.
Sure.
I tried for like 2 or 3 weeks. I gave it a good old college try, and I drank everything I could get, to see like what's this all about, And I get the flavors of hops and stuff like that. Some of them are fantastic, and there were some great beers, but every time I would have multiple IPAs, I'd wake up and my head would just be exploding. For some reason, it just took all the water out of me.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
was like, yeah. So it's just like a multitude of things. It told me, don't drink me. So I don't.
sure. All right, so I have a question for you. So you had talked about, brewing at home and process. Sometimes people talk about that was nice, isn't this nice? We can be right here.
In all personal here. Yes, go ahead, Adam.
I really want to talk to you seriously for a moment. What is for you? Sometimes people like to say, brewing is part science, part art. Where do you come down on that? Like personally for you, I'm not talking about for other people. How does that shake out for you? Do you feel like that's your experience as a brewer?
I think the art part of it is kind of, it's fancy, right? Because you can do anything can be art, But
Sure.
For brewing, it is science.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of similarities with cooking. I like
Yeah.
cooking, so
Yeah.
it's knowing ingredients and making your ingredients taste like something.
Yeah.
So you have that aspect of it, and then you have so to me it's culinary and it is science.
Sure. Well, and I think
those two.
I think you hit on. I think we really agree. I mean, sure there's all that. But it really is, and it's the same thing with food, right? Like I enjoy cooking myself. My wife and I are two different kinds of cooks. My wife is awesome, but she's also somebody that just puts ingredients into her hands and then throws it in. And sometimes that
Yeah.
drives me crazy, right? Sometimes that drives me crazy. But I think in a lot of ways, like I'll cook something or I'll make a sauce or something to accompany something else. And I can't taste it and know exactly what it needs, but she can tell me exactly what it needs, like instantly, right? The flip side is that she couldn't follow a recipe if her life depended on it. You know what I mean? If somebody
Yeah.
is like, listen, there's a bus full of grandmas hurtling toward this cliff. The only way to stop it from going off is you following this chili recipe.
Yeah.
Well,
Say bye-bye.
Say
They lived good lives. See ya.
they had their time. But I don't know. I think you hit on exactly that thing, and it's something that really plugs in with me. It's the same thing with beer as it is with food. And to me, ultimately, beer is about balance. And it's not always about making a balanced beer because some styles are inherently unbalanced, right? But it's understanding how one component is going to affect another, right? And yeah, that was just I love that. And with food, I do think there's that fantastic carryover. I remember the first time I started realizing like, okay, so acid and bitterness are doing the same job, right? And that blew my mind. And I'm not talking about those two things together because they get a bit medicinal in my mind, a little bit aspirin-y, acid and bitterness.
Mm.
But I mean, both those things are balancing a beer, right? You can balance a beer with acid, you can balance a beer with bitterness. And I mean, I remember when that hit me and it was like that, it's like one of those bike riding moments, right? Where something clicks for you and it's like, oh, and it kind of blows your mind, and then it just sits there. So no, I completely identify with that culinary type approach to it.
Yeah, I think there's some OCD issues you have to have with both of them in order to really do it well, whether it's cooking or beer. You know, I'll sit in front of like a recipe if I haven't made it before,
Yeah,
and it is, I'll know, you know, like what I want to use, but then I will sit there and literally just move pounds around until it looks right. And I'll do that for 45 minutes.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
like 100 pounds. No, that doesn't seem right. 58. No. And I'll get like
Sure.
weird numbers sometimes, like 57 and a half pounds of this, 27 and a half pounds of that. Like, I mean, just until it, so I don't know, you know, you have to put in a little of the weird stuff too. But I think the culinary, you're making something that has taste. That's a concept of it,
Yeah,
flavor. So inherently, you have a culinary aspect to it. The only difference between us and guys in the kitchen is we deal in liquid for the most part. I mean, end
yeah,
result is always a liquid form.
yeah.
Um, it's never. Oh, it should never be a solid form. You know, it's always a liquid form. So that's a right. Really does something really wrong. But so to me, yeah, it's all a culinary thing, and then the science stuff, and you know the microbiology part of it with the yeast and stuff like that. I think is a neat, you know, the pH concepts and
Yeah.
aeration, and then just finger crossing is part of it. So a little
Now
bit of voodoo
the
in there, and then
yeah, man. The yeast stuff is something I'm just starting to jump into. Rock, can you? It'll literally take me 3 seconds to grab a can of beer. Are you good for 3 seconds?
oh jeez,
My man.
grab two, grab one for me.
All right. So before we get in any further, I noticed you were drinking out of a fine stein there. What were you what are you drinking, bud?
That's one of my well, that's my Hefeweizen from Redwood.
Nice, nice. So I
What did you
actually
grab? Did you grab one of these guys?
I'm
I don't think I
yeah.
see it.
So the first beer I had was our Hellas up the hill.
Yeah.
And I'm a company man tonight. I've got I drank our Hellas up the hill, and now we're doing all that IPA talking. And to be honest, this is our IPA Sabo. I rarely have full pints of what I make. And so this is a good opportunity for me to
Why?
do that.
How come?
Um, I think it's just the space that I'm at right now, like as a dad, is like for me, and so my kids range from, and you know, but my kids range anywhere from 20 years old to 1 year old. And if for me, if I come home and have a beer, like I will just want to fall asleep. Like I will not. And like if I get to the point to where I have a couple beers and then I have more energy, then I'm like probably not the dad I need to be at that point where I'm like, hey kids, what's going
Or
on?
the dad they want you to be. I mean, you're probably the dad they want you to be. You're like, oh, thank God,
I will say the
dad's
craziest
a
thing,
little bit happier today.
my 1 year old, like in the last couple weeks, like when I come home, he's so excited and he runs up to me. It's like that constant, like, it's not walking, it's more like just perpetually stopping himself from falling, like that thing. And then he runs up and I must hold him for a very long time. And if I try to put him down, he loses it. This is usually, and you've met my wife, they tend to prefer her more than me. So he's been my little man lately. But yeah, I mean, like there's stuff I need to do. And then the flip side is honestly, man, I can't drink calories, right? Like I just get heavy. I'm not gonna lie, man. I'm not gonna
Just
lie.
don't eat. Just
And
don't eat. Like dinner, you don't need dinner. You know, what are you going to do? Are you going to die if you don't have dinner?
So
I know what you mean. It is tough. You got to. Do you go to the gym? I mean, what do you do to not? You just don't drink. Is that your thing?
I mean, I really don't. I mean, honestly, the only time I have beers is if I'm getting together with people. And this counts as getting together with people, by the way.
Right.
So, like, I mean, by and large, and yeah, I mean, usually like beer that people bring over to my house is still in the fridge, or beer that I brought for somebody else that's still in the fridge. Um, but uh, but yeah, so I often don't drink full pints of my stuff. And because yeah, I mean, I got to run pick up kids. I'm busy on the home side, right? And so I feel like I got to kind of have my game up there. But just before I grab, go ahead.
Do you feel that if you is your palate, are you able to discern different things better when you're not drinking as much, or do you find that you kind of get more used to some flavors? And like I drink pretty much every day.
Sure.
Just I don't know. It's probably not well. It's not healthy, but whatever. Life is short.
Sure.
And I think my palate sucks. My wife's palate is like crazy. That's why I sit and stare at the screen and go 85 pounds of this 20. You know what I mean? Like that's my thing. She has the palate, which is insane.
Sure.
I mean, I can taste salt in food. I mean, mine is more towards food. With beer, I like to try to put as much stuff into a glass as possible, and that way I can taste it because I just don't feel my palate's all that great. But I drink almost every day, so I'm wondering for you, if you were to drink every day, would your ability to discern flavors and things like that go down, or being that you don't drink that often, you feel that your palate is better?
I feel like I don't know if it's in some ways it's like you're kind of approaching it with fresh eyes, right? But I will say on some level I feel like it's almost a detriment. Like a dream of mine is I want to. So one of the awesome things about Cartridge is you were there. I have 6 to 8 lagers on, which is awesome for me. And it's great that people want to drink them. That there's demand for lager, right? And so, but you and I are sitting here reading those style guidelines and drinking imported versions of these beers and trying to figure out, what the hell these beers taste like, right?
Yep.
I feel like what I really need to do is I need to go there, not get a can of it, not get a bottle of it. I need to go to that brewery where it is on draft, and I need to sit there. And then the question becomes is legitimately how many pints of that beer. So if I just wanted to say Weinstefan Helles or whatever, how many pints of that beer do I need to have before I can say, okay, I think I understand what this beer is about? And I'm not saying know it inside and out, things like that. But quite honestly, I think that number is probably 3, right? Like, I mean,
good for you.
Well, no,
Good
but
for
I mean,
you.
not like to where you have it all.
I mean,
not to where you have it all figured out. But I mean, you need to rep
I think
that.
3 is awesome. 3 is great. I mean, 3. Holy cow! I would. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. We've had this conversation. I think you should sit there for like days and just inundate your body. And so like, I don't want any more of this. I am so tired of this.
But you can. But I think you can start to
$1,000 bill drinking Helles. That's me.
But
because my palate sucks when it comes to beer.
But no, but I do think that like I honestly think that it's I could probably know my own beers better. Now I will say that I taste those beers every time I brew them, right? Like, and I'm doing sensory throughout. But like, okay, so like I brewed up the hill our Helles recently. As I'm getting ready to fill out that recipe sheet, I go out and I taste that beer on draft again, and I sit with it for a minute. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And yeah, right. And so I'm doing that, and then I'm tasting that beer all the way through the process, through fermentation, everything like that. So yeah, I mean that's kind of my approach. But yeah, honestly, I do think that it could potentially. I could have a deeper knowledge base of the beers that I have on. Like if you bring me one of my beers, I'm gonna know what it is, you know.
That'd be great if you didn't. You're like, oh, this is
I
horrible.
don't know. This
So,
beer's what it's wet. That's what I can say about this. It's wet.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Whoever made this,
Um,
that would be a good test. You know,
well, and I don't know.
little
I
triangle
think
test.
sure, sure. But no, I feel like that's something that I could be that I could be sharper on. But that's my thing is when I'm going back. I usually taste. I definitely taste all of our standards every week. What have become our standards every week. And you know the big beers I'm turning a lot. I'll go through and I'll definitely taste those weekly, and sometimes 2 times a week. But you know, like if I don't get together with people, like somebody asked me this recently, I probably don't drink more than 20 ounces of beer in a week. Um, so,
That seems so weird to me, and it shouldn't. You know, it makes me feel like an alcoholic.
well, I mean that's not the point. But then again, I mean, you know, I'm still doing the young kid thing, man. You know,
Yeah, that's true.
and to be honest, like I don't, I actually don't even. It's a very small window of enjoyment for me drinking. Like when we go out to CBC, we'll go out and have beers and stuff like that. But there's a point for me to where it's like, dude, I'm good. And like beyond this, it's just not fun anymore. And I think my point for that is maybe
Three
lower than
pints.
some other people. What's that?
I said 3 pints.
Could be. Could be. But yeah, man. Yeah. So well let me bounce something else off you.
Yeah.
Right before I grabbed this pint, we were starting to talk about yeast, cell counting a little bit. I'm just trying to step my game up on that right now. I've been running this essentially the same 2 strains. Basically the Augustiner strain, which from Imperial is known as Harvest. Which, dude, as far as ease of use, that slurry is so easy to work with. It's like foamy, cakey. It wants to hold a shape. It's so easy to work with, dude. It's none of this like, you know, super thin slurry. The flip side is I will say, you know, 3470, the Vine Stefan, like the cleaner of the two, I think, is a gorgeous strain as well. The finished beers are gorgeous with that.
Yeah.
Obviously nothing wrong there. But I've been messing. I've been starting to dive into that. I think you've been counting yeast longer than me. How long have you been working with a microscope in the lab, Rock?
Geez, 5 years maybe, which
Nice.
isn't that long. And
Well, yeah.
yeah,
I
I think
mean,
about 5 years. I mean, so ever since Redwood's been almost 3, 2, 3. I don't
yeah,
know. So I would say about 5 years. Yeah, it could be 6, could be 2. But I mean, it's been about 5 years. I have you know, like a little graph that I have in my, not the one that I sent you. That's just the one from Redwood that has, you know, like the batches and the viabilities and the amount pitched in the beer and you know what I mean, all that thing.
okay,
Um, so I have a Redwood one, and then I have one from Bastogne. But it's relatively recent to the point where I don't feel like I know uh, exactly what I'm doing, but I
sure,
know enough to where I feel like I know enough. You know what I mean? Like I can make some educated choices and decisions based on I know what a bad cell looks like. I know what a good cell looks like. I know when
yeah,
I need to when it's an oh type of situation. You know,
yeah,
so
yeah,
not long enough. I wish I would have started when I first started, but I was a little it was too daunting. You know, like microscopes and counting yeast cells and like what does that mean? And, you know, that's just something I don't need to know. Uh, you know, a lot of places just say pitch this amount of pounds if it's an ale, this amount of pounds per barrel if it's a lager and that kind of thing. And I kind of stuck with that for a long time. I think as you did, just because it was easy and there was
yeah.
no
And
need to
it's what's
really dive
available,
in.
right? Like it's not cone to cone. right? So it's not just kind of blind pushing yeast into another vessel, which people do and make great beer with, right? And so like for me, that was the thing. Well, it's like, okay, so at least I'm measuring, right? So okay, so I'm gonna crash this. I'm gonna pass diacetyl on this beer. I'm gonna crash it for the same number of days, and then I'm gonna blow the same volume of yeast off the bottom of the cone, and then I'm gonna harvest off of that, right? So you try to
Yeah.
set up parameters. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
at least you're getting something semi-repeatable, right? But I do think that the scope is obviously kind of next level on that. Now, do you feel as if after working with the scope, kind of dialing those things in, do you feel as if you've seen that pay off for you in the brewery?
Well, I feel as if I know. I feel more assured about what I'm doing. I don't know if the beers are coming out better. I mean, I I don't taste one of my beers and say this is fantastic. Very rarely have I made a beer. I've been brewing for
Sure.
20 years. Uh, I there's a handful of times where I've made a beer and I've said this is fantastic.
Yep.
So it's not like it's a continuous not good enough thing. Just I think as we've talked about this, you have that same affliction where it's never good enough. So there is no pride in this beer. There is no this is fantastic. This you're going to love it because a guy at the bar or a guy at a festival is like, oh, this is what I would have done. Is
Yeah.
this or so you think the beer is fantastic and it
Yeah.
probably is like really it's a great representation of a style. Maybe you've
Sure.
won an award with it somewhere, so you have some accolade to kind of back up your own feeling about it. And then a guy's like, or a woman or whatever, some kid
Yeah.
is like, kind of stuck. You're like,
Dude, I tell you
yeah,
what,
okay. I mean,
12-year-olds
okay, fine.
hate my Hellas. I can say that.
And they hate my hat. My no, I don't want that on camera. No, I know. Hellas is not for 12-year-olds. Wait till
That's
they're like
true.
15 or 16.
That
And
is
I'm like,
very true. Very, very
it's
true. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to be interested to see what the scope does for me. It is exciting for me to be in this spot where I mean, there's a lot of guys that their place won't buy them a scope or whatever. You know what I mean? And it's a
yeah,
pain, right? So the fact that I have the resources to get the stuff and then I have the labor, I have the team that I have that puts me in that position to keep growing like that it's exciting. Um, I don't know, and I think that's
uh,
one of the cool things about what we do is that there really are so many layers to what we're doing. It almost changes that expectation, like we talked about before, like to say that we're going to make the perfect whatever. It almost starts to sound more and more foolish. Like the further you go down the rabbit hole with all the things there are to learn and manipulate, right? That's when you're
yeah,
like, man, there's so much more of this road to travel than I even thought
yeah,
there was, right? Yeah.
yeah. The
Yeah.
George Harrison, the farther one travels, the less one really knows, and it's just the way that it works. The more you want to learn, the more you realize you don't know anything. So then you're just trying to figure out, just grasping whatever knowledge you can get, pack it together, and then you realize you don't know anything anyway, or not enough. You never know
Sure.
enough.
Sure.
You know.
So I mean, what do you think is what's one of the biggest areas of change or growth in you as a brewer? Like since you are at, you said Big Buck, Rochester, the early places you are at to where you are now. What like what is your biggest area of growth? This can be technical, philosophically. Like what do you think that the biggest leap has been from you from then to now?
I think that awards mean nothing, but I think that they do allow a brewer to be able to look at an award, right? Like, and say, okay, I do know what I'm doing. So I
Sure.
mean, for growth, I mean, there's knowledge of grain and what a yeast is supposed to look like and when it's what it's not. There's the flavors of grains and things like that. So it's it's in different sections, but the largest one for me was winning some larger awards and then trying to make a beer. That beer wins an award and going, okay, now I know what I'm doing. That happens a few times. And then I say to myself, okay, I do know what I'm doing.
Sure.
So confidence. The awards don't make a beer good. A good beer doesn't always win an award.
Yeah.
But if you win a few awards or something, it doesn't have to be the GABF, the World Beer Cup. It could be the World Expo, in Michigan. It could be the U.S. Open. It could be USBTC. It could be that one in Chicago, the BTI. It could be whatever it is. But if you make a beer that you're trying to make, and you enter it as the style that you're trying to make, and then you win something for it, and maybe you win 1, you win 5, 10, whatever the case is. I think for me, winning a few awards on beers that I wanted to win awards on allowed me to feel like I knew what I was doing when it came to those specific things. So that was like a emotional growth, I guess, if that fits in that category. Other than that, like I've told you before, with the yeast, when I at Bastogne, I kept yeast. There were open squares, and when I would rack a beer up the fermenter, I would have to take a sanitized plastic shovel. I get up on a ladder and go down in and take it and put it into a bucket, put the lid on it, and stick it in a cooler. And then I remember one time I got out. I think I told you this. And I had 2 different yeast strains. One, it was I don't know what I was making, but I went to go I took the lid off of it, and it didn't look right. Yeah. So I went and I got the other one, and I realized that I had incorrectly marked the yeast. So learning what the yeast actually looked like in a 5-gallon pail kind of blew my mind. I was like, whoa! I felt so proud. I learned something.
Yeah, man.
It was ridiculous.
It's crazy, and I was telling. I love training new people, and it's that teacher in me, whatever. But there's different ways that you can carry out different processes. This part of the process, I recirc my mash at typically like 2.5 to 2.7 on my dial. That's the speed that I run that at. But at the same time, you need to look inside the mash tun and also see the shape of that work coming out of that that return arm. And for me, it runs along the side of the kettle. It's actually a pipe that just runs flush up against almost. So it kind of forms
like a whirlpool almost.
Parabola, yeah. And so it kind of drops a parabola down the side.
Cool word.
But right. But you need to get that visual, right? Because there's going to be different factors. If that mash tun is, spray balls deep in grain, I'm not going to need as much pressure on that pump because I have more head pressure in the mash tun, right?
Spray balls deep. That's good. Good one, Adam.
I mean, sometimes it's right up there, and sometimes it's right up there.
I know what you mean.
But and then you have that lower gravity work in the mash tun, so there's not all that pressure on top, right? So it's really important to take the visual of that stuff, and we joke around with it at work, but like we blew off. I blew off some Treuben yeast off of a double IPA that we were doing, and you do like you grab that stuff and you fricking get your face in there, right? Like you need to understand like the smells, textures, and different things that are going on with those raw materials, right? And I think one of the overlooked things that people, one of the things I never saw coming about professional brewing, and especially when I've been attached to kitchens, like legit kitchens that do scratch cooking. I'm sorry for anybody out there that doesn't have a scratch kitchen or whatever. But when I say legit, like people handling food, right? There's something from a sensory standpoint, like handling 1,200 pounds of Pilsner malt, right? And getting that stuff in the air, like it's everywhere, right? Like you're never going to have a better opportunity to understand those malts, or what that yeast is going to smell like when you're blowing 20 gallons of yeast off the bottom of a tank, right? Or all those hops, or this, that, or the other thing. The sensory experiences in a brewery are so huge, like they're so overwhelming, that it's just a great palate and sensory builder, you know.
It is, yeah. I usually, when I blow off yeast, I always stick a finger in there and the yeast, hits the floor and grab it and taste it. And just to see, like what is it? I mean, it doesn't taste
Yeah, man.
good. It's just this bitter, thing. And it's, people watch you do it or something. And they're like, what the hell are you doing? It's like, like rubbing your finger through, like the stuff on the floor. And then you're like, it's just
Well, the
not normal
top tier
to
of
do,
it.
You're like,
The
oh,
top tier. It's
and
off.
then
Yeah. A little off the top, you
Yep,
know.
sure, yeah, whatever it is, but it's just, but you're right. Tasting those things, I'll taste almost always when I'm graining in, because I got a grist case. So the day before I'll grain in, I'll always taste the grain just to see,
Okay.
and then when I'm mashing, I'll taste it just to see it, how sweet it is. I at this point, I have a silo, so I know for when I'm making like a Helles or a Kolsch or something like that, I understand what it's going to taste like. But it's just to make sure that kind of keep that thing going. And it's not even really for that. It's just become a habit.
Well, it's part of the and that was one of the things earlier you mentioned, the 12-hour brew day, and now it's 6 hours. And it's not all about getting it as, freaking smashing that wort out as fast as possible. You want to be efficient, right? And everything like that. But I'll tell you, I still think like the most romantic / magical thing about what we do is it's usually a day I'm not supposed to be there or I don't want to be there. Like it's a Saturday or it's a Sunday, but there's nobody in the space and it's you on the equipment that and there's no sounds other than what you're doing. And there's something I remember when I was when we were getting Cartridge off the ground, right? And I'm turning the system for the first time. And it's laborious, man. And I'm figuring out the diverter panel in the front, trying to figure out where everything's going. And some of the things were rerouted. And I was just thinking, man, I look forward to just like it's like the Matrix, like when Neo like breathes in and like the shit moves towards his face and then he exhales it out. Like that's awesome. Like I love that feeling of like having the brew house just be like a part of you, and when it behaves this way, this is what needs to happen. To me, that's and it always comes as this weird double-edged sword. Like I seem to only really appreciate that when it's a day when I probably don't want to be there. Like it's an extra day or something like that.
Sure.
But the joint's quiet. You know what I mean? And it's just you in your space. Yeah, man, there's something magic about it. There's something magic about that process and that ritual, man. That's really what it is.
It is. And I don't envy you having employees, if you will. I work by myself. So no, I mean I've met your assistants there, and they're fantastic people.
They are absolutely.
But for the longest, yeah, they are. I mean, I could see that being fun.
Rock, I need an audience. Okay, I mean you just can't.
I know.
I can't let all this go to waste. You know what I mean? It would just be.
It would be a waste. It would be an absolute waste. But for most of my career, I mean, Bastogne is 15 years. I've been here for 2 or 3 or whatever it is. I worked by myself. My Bastogne, I worked in a basement with no windows by myself. You know what I mean? So it was all like that. What you're talking about, so like dialing in a system, and then you have that Neo moment. I like that reference. Then same thing at Redwood. The first day I went in there, it was like, oh man, the first day kind of that I brewed was very nerve wracking because all I wanted to do was know the damn system.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to know when something, this valve, this is exactly what I want it to be. And it took longer than I wanted it to be, or wanted it to, whether that be 2 brews or 1 or 10 or 15. I mean, it can't be soon enough. But once it happens, it's a fantastic feeling to go in there and not be nervous about a brewer. Know that this is going to happen, and this is just to be comfortable. And even after a decade and a half, and then going to another place, they still have those jitters, if you will, about it's like it's ridiculous. And I feel stupid when when that happened. I'm like, I know what I'm doing.
Well, and
You
the
know, I mean,
flip side
I've
is,
done this before. It's
we
like,
joke
geez.
around like this at work where it's like, even when you screw up, even when you screw up, you're almost always going to make sugar. Okay. Like in the
Yeah.
mash, right? Like it's hard to not make sugar in the mash. It can happen, right? But it's hard to not make sugar.
Can it? I mean, really, can it? Have you ever not made sugar? You know what I mean? Like it's almost impossible at
Sure.
this level to not do
Well,
something. You know?
and it's like this weird space where like, and this sounds like super weird and like hippie and woo woo or whatever, but like the beer's gonna happen. Like by and large, like this process has been happening for so long, right? Like
Yeah.
we think that, well, the only way beer can happen is if all of these process points are hit and all these things. It's like, dude, this has been happening for a long time. Now, granted,
Yeah.
whether or not the beers were lactic or whatever, things like that, that's a separate issue. But yeah, man, I don't know. I think that's
Yeah. That goes along with when last time I saw you, I was telling you about I was brewing a Kolsch. Everything was great. I brewed like 18 barrels in the kettle. Right. I got a fresh pitch of Kolsch yeast,
Mhm.
2565 from Yeast.
Mhm.
Put it in my fermenter. Set it at like I don't know 59 or something. It's a Kolsch, right? So I come in the next day. It's at 27 degrees, 31 degrees. I mean,
That
that's
is
it.
not
That's
your
over. Right?
ideal temp, Brock.
No, no, it is not. So I was like, oh hell, what do I do? So I cleaned another tank. I kind of kept it a little hot. I mean, I did it and
Yeah,
I kept it warm. I didn't do
yeah,
it. I did another separate tank with a caustic and an acid. I didn't do a sanitizer because sanitizer usually I do cold. So I didn't do that. I racked the beer onto there and then chalk it up as a loss.
sure.
And 2 days later, it was at like 50. Started bubbling, I think, in the upper 40s, and
Yeah,
then started bubble, like more and more in the 50s, and then it got up to like 60, whatever. So it, ramped up the whole deal.
sure.
I put the spooning valve on that thing,
Yeah,
so it's sitting at like 10. I pull a sample off of it. It goes down to like 1008, 1007. Which is kind of normal-ish, right?
yep, yep,
And it tasted fine. I mean, I
yeah,
won't be serving it because I don't know what it'll taste like in 3 weeks.
sure.
So it's trashed, and that's the one that I sent you those that yeast uh,
Yeah,
on the hemocytometer deal. I sent that
sure.
to you, and viability was at like almost 100%.
Dude, it
So
was
like
baller. That was great looking yeast, man.
it was. So yeah, it'll find a way. Is what
Yeah.
I'm saying. It'll make, and it actually tasted. I was shocked. I was hoping it would taste worse because it was. It made me think like, what if I put it on? But I'm like, no, I can't put it on tap because
It's
it's
outside
a
parameter,
Frankenstein
right?
beer.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
just it can't be. I can't do that. I can't
yeah,
feel good about. I won't be able to. I will not be able to sleep at night if that goes on tap. Literally, I will not be. I will have horrible sleep for
and
as
you
long
have
as
the
that.
leeway there to be able to do that.
To do what? Not put it on tap?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I told my boss. I said, hey, this happened.
Good for you, man.
They came out. They fixed the tank, so that's good. I
Yeah,
racked over my Coverfest, and it's lagering in there at
beautiful.
like 34 degrees. But you know, you have a you have to have a standard
Yeah,
in which you make a product, and if you don't adhere to the standard, then whatever. Then what are you doing?
yeah,
Then you might as well
yeah.
make I don't know, a 12% Helles that's triple dry hopped and you know lactic barrel aged kettle. I mean,
You've
you know
been
what I
you,
mean.
you've been reading my diary. That's
I have been reading it.
I'm gonna change the industry with the 12.5% Hellas, triple
Yeah,
dry hopped. Um,
yeah.
no, man, that's cool. That's cool. Um, a couple other things like I get one of the things that I've been surprised by since I've been doing this is the number of people that first of all hit me up and say, I am currently opening my own place. And not like it's my dream to open my place, but I am currently opening my own place. Um, And then the people that say, I am planning on opening my own place or planning on getting into the industry. Um, I was shocked by how many people were reaching out to me about that stuff. I I view in a lot of ways this industry as still an apprenticing industry. Obviously, more and more degreed programs have popped up along the way. What would be your advice to like the younger person that wants to get into the industry? And honestly, the number of people that already have careers that hit me up that want to move
Hmm.
into this field. It's really, really interesting, man. Kind of, what's your thoughts on getting into the field?
There are so many breweries right now. I don't know. For 10 years, it's been, when is the ceiling going to hit? And
Yeah,
then it goes from, I mean, I don't, I have no idea how many breweries there are anymore. There was like 600 when I started. Now I think there's 6 million. I don't have any idea what it is. Um,
somewhere around there.
it's a lot. It's a lot. My thought, if somebody came to me and said, well, I'm thinking about getting into brewing, I'd say, that's fantastic. You, are you brewing at home right now? And if they're not, that's where I would start. You have to start from the bottom.
And
You
tell
have
me
to know your
why.
grain.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, go for it.
It's like becoming a doctor. Not that being a brewer is like a doctor, but you got to know your craft.
Yeah.
Because if you're gonna, you know, cash in your 401k or sell your house or whatever, and you're just doing it because you think beer is cool, that's fantastic. But if you don't have anything behind it, you're going to lose everything, and then you're screwed.
Sure.
You got to have some knowledge, and you got to have a little bit of experience behind you, whether that be homebrewing or not. I would, if I were starting out right now, if it were me, I would homebrew like I did before. I would brew every day. I'd brew every day, and if it didn't turn out, I, I don't know. Uh, I used to dump stuff, but I would brew every day or a lot, as
Yeah.
much as I possibly could. Let's say, right? I would read a lot of books. I would see about apprenticing at breweries, free of charge, of course. I mean, you know, they're the object is that they teach you something. So that would be uh, to me, for me, that would be payment enough, right? Now, information,
Sure.
knowledge, experience. Um, but read a lot of books. Read every book you can get your hands on 5 times.
Yeah.
Know everything you could possibly know about the most simplest of things: fermentation and temperature, uh, mash. What is a sugar rest? What's a protein rest? What is what's mash out temp and why?
Yeah.
pHs, because the game now isn't what it was 20 years ago.
How so?
Um, well, I think people are getting more involved in education. Like you and I, we've been doing it for quite some time, and I think that now we're like, I got a DO meter. I got to figure out what that is, dissolved oxygen thing, because that
Yeah.
plays a part. pH, you have to get the particulars in order now, because if you just make a beer that your friends like, and they're coming over and they're drinking it for free, and that's fantastic. But if you're going to open up a business, it has to be better than, or at least what to me, it has to be better than what's going on somewhere else down the road, because grain is incredibly high. Everything is a lot pricier now.
Yeah.
So it's when I go to a, a brewery or a pub or whatever, and I got a $7-8 pint, that thing better knock my socks off,
Yeah.
or I'm not going back, and I
Sure.
won't have another. I'll just walk out. You get $7 to state your claim, and if
Sure.
it doesn't work, I'm out, and I'm never going back
Sure.
because I don't have time for that stuff. I don't have no desire. I'll drink something else. I'll buy a 6-pack for $12 and have great beer from overseas.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Again,
Sure.
German stuff or whatever. I mean, that's my thought. You only get one shot, so it would be educate yourself as much as possible, brew as much as you can, enter some competitions and get feedback. Become
Yeah.
a judge like the BJCP thing, so you know how people are tasting beers. You know what things are supposed to taste like, what they're not supposed to taste like. It's all about education, and then put it into practice. And no timelines. It's not like making a pizza. It doesn't happen in 2 hours. It takes 3 weeks, let's say, right? I mean,
Sure.
at the closest, if they make an IPA at home or something, at 3 weeks
Yeah.
or Hefeweizen, and even then, it's a little green. So
Sure.
be patience, and when you do get a job, your first job shouldn't be a head brewer. You should be an apprentice somewhere or an assistant, so you
Yeah.
can learn from somebody, because you don't know what you think you know until you're in there, and then you're like, oh, I don't know anything.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, I've got we always call them, we like to call them brew babies. I've got a handful of people that I've trained into the industry, and I think it's interesting, like the two of my favorite examples. I trained up two great guys, and when I was working in Big Rapids at Crankers. I trained up Andy Gallagher, again from Linwood, and then Chris Schneff, who's running production operations up at Stormcloud. And Andy had been homebrewing for years and was coming in to help out on the bottling line that we were running at the time, and he was bringing me in like plus side beer. You know what I mean? Where you're
Yeah,
like, "Ag, this is good stuff," And
that's great.
yeah, and so the interesting thing is, then I end up hiring him, and then we have the kind of protocol people need to have. You need to understand how small parts get cleaned. You need to understand how to clean kegs, keg off beer, and then you're cleaning tanks, and then you're on the brew house. That's kind of the general concepts. Those concepts all build off of each other and everything like that. But when I got Andy on the brew house, he had a lot of experience brewing at home, and so he had to translate some of his home brewing knowledge into our equipment, right? And so what that meant was that his wheels were going to be turning, his wheels were turning a little bit harder on the translation. Okay.
Sure.
Chris had no home brewing background and just started helping us out. It's the same, like similar to Andy. And then I ended up giving him, he just got out of college. We gave him some work, whatever. And then he was a smart kid. I got him through the baseline stuff. I got him on the brew deck, and his learning curve was shorter than Andy's. Okay. But the flip side is they were two different brewers at that point in their career, right? Like it took Andy a little bit longer to learn some of the processes simply because he already had a knowledge base beneath him, and he had to go through that translation process, right? From
Right.
homebrewing equipment to pro brewing equipment. Chris had no background. So when I was showing him the brew day, it was bullet points. He's checking off a
Sure.
list of these functions, right? But by the time they both were able to turn wort, one guy would be able to troubleshoot more than the other, right? So it's something that I'm always a little bit torn with as far as that goes. I've had people that have had done internships as degreed programs, and I think there's space for that. Um, but I also think there's something to be said for getting your foot in the door, probably getting paid for it as well, and really just even getting a pulse for the brewery, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like understanding what it means to be here week in and week out.
Yeah.
On Monday we clean kegs because we've got a ton of kegs that have come back from distro and front of house from the beer we poured this weekend. We're washing kegs. I'm running extra cleaning cycles on the brew house to prep up for our week. We might be kegging off some beer as well. We're doing some cellaring work, stuff like that. And we're gearing up for the brewing that we're going to be doing the rest of the week and the packaging that we're going to be doing. It's just good to get that pulse, man, to understand what's happening around you, you know?
Right. And not everything is making beer in a brewery. Like
Dude, it's
my niece,
so, yeah.
she's going to school in New York for like winemaking, but she's working at a
Hmm.
brewery,
Hmm.
Peacemaker up in New York. She's bartending and stuff. but I had her out here. We made a beer at Redwood, and I had her. I was having her stir mash, and I was having her do stuff, and
You have a rake?
I had her do cell. No, no, I have
you hand
a
mash in
paddle.
a 15 barrel mash tun?
Yeah,
You savage.
yeah,
That's
yes,
a man
indeed.
right there.
Hands on, man. Rake. You're pampered over there. No, I have never. Well, except for Big Buck. I mean, 20 years ago, I had a rake. That was
Sure.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But no, I've been stirring mash for a long time, and I like it because you get in there, it splashes on your face and burns, and you're like, oh, I mean, I don't know. It's part of the day. You sweat your ass off, and then you're like,
For
what? You're
sure.
making beer,
For
But
sure.
that's
Yeah.
part of the deal. But
Yeah.
my point is that I had her doing cell counts and stuff, and she kind of gravitated towards the microbiology part of it.
Sure.
So brewing, you may get in there because you want to make beer, and you like you like beer, you like the concept of making beer, but you may actually find that the brewing part is not as exciting as maybe cellaring for some reason, or counting yeast cells, or there's a lot of avenues in a brewery depending on what brewery you go to, as to your options for employment and a career.
The next question that I have is, what don't people know about what you do?
What I what I do.
Yeah, what don't people know
I,
about what you do? Like when people talk to you, like, oh, you're a brewer. Like, what are the expectations people have for your day to day that are not necessarily what those things are?
right. I think, well, you know the answer for the most part. A lot of people think that a brewer, beer makes itself. You go to work and you drink beer, and it's awesome all the time, and it's the best job in the world. And it is one of the best jobs in the world. I don't know a better one for me.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
is the best job in the world. But a lot of what you and I do, and what I do, excuse me, is we clean more than anything. So we're glorified cleaners for the most part. I mean, 70% of what I do is clean stuff, and then another 10% is brewing, and then 10% is scheduling, and 5% is, I don't know. Those probably aren't good percentages, but a large portion
We're
of
up to
what I do,
140%, Rock. That's
140%. Well, that's about right. Yeah, that's
that's how much
140%
you
kind of
bring.
job, Adam.
That's how much you bring to the table, dude.
That's right.
That's
Yeah. A lot of cleaning, no drinking. I don't drink at work.
sure.
I do not drink at work at all. I don't have a pint before I go. I don't have a pint when I'm brewing. I don't. When things come out of when I'm carving a beer and stuff, I'll taste it. I'll taste things
Sure.
throughout the process. But at no point in time of the day in my career, at Big Buck, I did. That was a different story. I was younger then, but it's not a drunk fest by anything. It's hard work, and you have beer. Well, that's not really what I do at work, but I think that when you make a beer, you have a period of time in which that beer is on tap. So if it's not good for that period, good being what we want it to be, right? Like dialed into our specs or whatnot, then I think that we kind of cringe while that's on tap, and then when it's over, we're like, I'm glad that like I have a Weissen that I made that wasn't what I wanted it to be. It still was fine,
Sure.
but not what I want it to be. It's just kind of like it's a downer. So there are some.
It is
emotional
the
issues when you
best
go.
feeling when a beer that you're not excited about goes off tap. And I'm not saying like a
It's one
bad
of them, yeah.
beer or
The
anything
one that
like
you
that.
like goes on tap, but when you taste it,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
very
yeah.
equal. When a great beer, you're like, wow, awesome, and then when one that you're like, oh, that just sucked, and then people will be like, oh, that's great, or not. The best beers are thumbs down. And you know what I mean? It's always an up or down thing. Thumbs up, thumbs down. It depends on the person drinking the beer. So it is. It's so relative to the customer
Sure.
as to whether a beer tastes good or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right or no? Is that just me or?
No, I agree, man. I feel like I don't know. I feel like I'm getting into a strange strange to what my original goals were. I feel like I'm getting into a strange area of my career where and I think it's actually a mercy is I think frequently like I have a more zoomed out notion of what's happening, and this isn't all the time, and I'm not going to say that I never lose my cool at work or I never get upset about the way something turns out or this, that, or the other thing. But I think my focus has really changed, and I think it's actually allowed me to be focused on the things that actually matter. I think there was a period of time where the focus was so much my stress of and I mean we've talked about for at this point probably the what amounts to days about the whole competition thing and everything like that and how
Sure.
much that plays into the value of a brewer. It's a strange it's a strange it's kind of a strange thing in some ways, right? In that like one of the things that's been dawning on me is over the years now, and I will say this, I would absolutely be very, very happy to win a World Beer Cup, a GABF medal at some point in my career. And I would like to be able to do that with regularity. That would be fantastic. But I'm also to a point of honesty to where I also know that the window for my happiness surrounding that is actually far smaller than what I used to dream it would be. Right.
Yeah.
And so now, like, and I don't know if it's like the old dad portion of me of it that's kind of factoring in now, but I really do like there's a range of things that I enjoy. Like there's that culinary aspect that you talked about that it just absolutely thrills me chasing balance and something endlessly drinkable in whatever style you're attempting to make, right? Um, but then I've worked at places where I've worked for people and people have worked for me. I absolutely love having people work for me. There is a certain element of having to let go of certain things. But right now I'm in a spot where um, like I have trust up to here with two people. I only have two people on my staff, but two people, bro, that's unheard of, man. That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
That's
and
good.
it's good and the nice thing is that like it actually so like it kind of scratches that teaching itch, but now I'm realizing by putting all that energy into developing them, now I need to find stuff to do. All right, now I still do day-to-day stuff. I still turn wort. I will still pitch in on occasionally cleaning tanks or occasionally kegging or moving grain, different things like that, right? But but like I'm getting to the point to now where it's like, all right, I need to start getting sharper. I need to start taking on concrete tasks that will make this brewery better and save this brewery money, right? Like let's get it. And so that's kind of the next thing with the yeast stuff. Um so yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Like when we when you won Belgian double in that in US Beer Open, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
won Schwartz beer, and that's awesome. That's great, but it doesn't like and like last year when we won a few in that competition. The thing I was excited about was that it didn't mean as much to me as I was concerned that it would.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. And I think it was 2018 in the World Beer Cup. I won. I think it was a bronze or something for a
Mhm.
Belgian quad.
Mhm.
And up until up until then, every competition, especially the World Beer Cup and the GABF, brew days for beers that I knew I was going to be entering were they were hellish kind of. I mean, it would be I would lose sleep. I would, like I said, with the recipes and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and they were just hyper focused for years and years. At that particular beer, when I did it, I didn't. I just made a beer.
Sure.
So I'm just going to make a beer. I don't. I don't even. I mean, I care, but I don't care. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
going to
yeah.
put that kind of energy into it more so than a beer that I'd be making that's just on draft somewhere that I'm not entering. And it ended up winning, like I said, that. And I remember feeling such relief that it didn't take all that effort to make a beer, and
Sure.
also that it didn't have the gravity of it. It was like, okay, cool, you know, like it won. It's nice. It's a great accolade. Any award is a great accolade to have.
Sure.
But I was happy on two fronts, that I didn't have to put all this stress into making a beer, and also when it did win, which was, you know, obviously fantastic. It was not this giant euphoric thing. It was more, every time I've ever won something, it's always been, you know, like an exhale and shoulders down. So it's
More of a
always, we had
relief,
this
right?
discussion.
Yeah.
It's always a
Yeah.
relief. So it's like, why the hell
Sure.
am I even entering this thing? Because it's kind of like, uh, I don't know, jumping out of a plane, you know, and hoping your chute
Sure.
opens.
Yeah, let's hope the shoot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're like,
no,
oh,
man.
geez, you know,
For
it's
sure.
almost, it's really not worth it to me anymore to do it. Like, you know, I'm going to see you in Denver in a few months,
Yep.
and we're going to have this conversation there when they're doing the awards. I'm going to look over to you and be like, hey, are you nervous? And you're going to say yes, and I'm going to say
Of
yes, and that's
course.
just the way it is. And it's
Yeah.
ridiculous that
Yeah.
we should be nervous about them calling our names for something, for a beer that
Well,
we know is.
and you know, the flip side is, and I think for a lot of us that get into this industry, for a lot of us, this is in some ways a passion project, right? Like
Yeah.
this is a creative pursuit for us, right? But the
Mhm.
reality is it's a business.
Right.
And the metals can help to magnify if handled appropriately, right? Like
Yeah.
they can be on the plus side of the ledger, but but there's also this other aspect that I've kind of been waking up to of is, you know, we're also doing business, right? And it's actually been one of the things that's pushed me. I remember years ago, I worked with Nate Walser at Greyline. Shortly after they opened. For those of you that don't know, Nate is one of the OG guys at Founders. And he's been different spots in between. Right now, he owns Greyline, and he's one of those he's one of those OG guys in Michigan, and responsible for a lot of the big original brands at Founders. And I remember I was talking to him, I was working there, and he's like, you know, give me what's a recipe for something that would be a good yeast grower, right? So obviously something lower alcohol, lower IBU, whatever. So I gave him like this recipe for, like, I don't know, in my mind it was like an American ale version of, like, you know, this Italian pills, like this super smashable, like super easy drinking, like lager type beer. But in my head, I wasn't playing in the lager field, I was playing in the ale field. So I pitched him this recipe of this, you know, this flavor and aroma forward, you know, 4.5% beer. Just something you could absolutely drink all day. You know what I mean? And he said, and he goes, that looks great. He said, I'd love to drink that, but I'd never sell that shit to my people. And I was like, what do you mean? And
Cool.
he goes, you and I want to drink that beer. They don't want to drink that. And that was a huge light switch moment for me. You know
Sure.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Because for so much of my career, while I'm like, well, I'm gonna put up a Cal Common, because
Yeah.
you know, and one time I put up what I thought at the time was a really nice Cal Common, man, and I thought that it fit well within my menu, but I didn't realize there was only demand for one hop forward beer on that board at that brewery, right? I already had an
Yeah.
IPA, and so people weren't going to touch this Cal Common that I was doing because for them it fell under the same category, right? Um, So yeah, I don't know. I completely lost my train of thought there, buddy. Um,
It's all right. I know what you're saying. I like to see the people getting back to old. I don't want to say old world style, but just like classic styles. Like when we go to Denver, I want to hit up Bierstadt, and
yeah,
there's another place like they're just brewing like Czech lagers.
yeah,
Bierstadt
man,
brewing strictly German lagers. Like there's
yeah,
becoming a I don't want to say a movement. I'm hoping that it is a movement, but you have a movement
yeah,
from going these giant IPAs down to session IPA. That's
sure,
one small thing. You have session beers. That's another small thing. Getting away from these massive one beer flavor bombs to
yeah,
quintessential, elegant, delicate styles, and people
hmm,
creating breweries and businesses around um, old school brewing. I think I
yeah,
think the circle is starting to connect, and I
yeah.
think that's a nice um, thing that I see happening.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking about it with with Andy Dodd at Linwood, man, and he was talking about when he first went down there, they would occasionally, they would have like they do a Czech Pils down there. It's a really nice beer. Um, and at first that wasn't up all the time, then it was up sometimes, and then it was a standard. Like it was the one lager that was always on draft. And then he's like, dude, I've got like 70, 90 barrels of lager in house right now. You know what I mean? And like that's a
A
big
lot of
deal.
lager.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I mean especially watching that trend. And like to me, what I see, and I even categorize, the newer school IPA, juicy IPA, whatever you want to call it, the more flavor aroma IPA. I think even that version of IPA is making the case for more accessible beer. I know IPA is not your jam as much, but the newer school IPA I do believe is more accessible than some of those enamel stripping
yeah,
150 IBU beers that we were drinking back, in the mid 2000s, early teens. And and yeah, and so I think, and then you see things that are quite obvious, like cider, seltzer, different things like that, and some of those ebb and flow or whatever. But I do think you really see now, and from my understanding on the West Coast, you're seeing lager pop up more and more. I do think it's going to roll back over, man. And I do think obviously IPA is going to have its spot, but I really do feel as if lager is going to have its day in the sun again. And I think part of the reason why is because it is good. I think all those things that we were talking about between seltzer, between the cider, between New England style beer, all these crazy smoothie beers that people are doing. People want things that are enjoyable to drink and approachable. Like there is something
yeah,
to an approachable beverage, right? And I think, like for so long we are getting high on our own shit of saying, oh, well, it's going to be 14%. It's going to be barrel aged. It's going to be double dry hops. All these different things. Like you end up coming to a point where you're like, also, there's a quote one time that I absolutely love, and I forget who the brewer was, but he said, at some point, I hope the person that you're having a pint with is more interesting than the pint,
right.
right? So like
Yeah, yeah, that's perfect.
you and I are sitting down drinking Helles, Hefeweizen, whatever. Like we can chat about it for a minute, but hopefully I'm more interested in talking to you than I am going on and on about the fact that this was dry hopped with donuts that had been cooked on the back of a sloth or something like that.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that
yeah.
would be good. That
I'm
might
I'm
happen.
working on that.
You're giving away some
The
secrets.
problem is getting the sloth through customs primarily.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a process we
No,
want
but
to happen in-house.
I think that the lager thing is coming back. I believe. I mean, just between you and I, I've gotten more towards the lager thing, right? And so have you. Like, I'm more lager heavy than I've ever been in my career. You know,
How many beers
and I
do
think
you keep on your board there at Redwood Rock?
like 13, I think.
13.
13.
How many are lagers?
Well, we
Regularly.
have well, just one.
Okay.
There's one. We got a Helles. We do Kolsch, a Helles, a Pale, an IPA, um, Stout, and a Porter.
Yep.
I don't think I'm in a Pale. Um, but when everything other than those, I try to brew. You know, like I have a Vienna on. Obviously, Oktoberfest is coming up. I got a
Yep.
Pilsner on. So whenever I have an open spot, I'm brewing a lager for those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And Hefeweizen is a mainstay, but I'm brewing lagers just because they're sessionable beers, and I think people are starting to. I'm hoping anyway that people are liking craft beer. They want to have beer, not just have one or two, but be able to sit and, like you said, talk, have communications with friends, family, blah blah blah, over a few beers instead of just talking about a beer to themselves. So I think that those styles that are the lager styles, I think lend to
Yeah.
communication and just being with people and having some drinks as opposed to
Well, and
not.
they're food positive beers too, right? Like
Yeah,
these beers actually just go with food. And you can get really technical and say, well, it explicitly goes with this or better with this. But man, the other beer I have in the fridge is our Dunkel. And you had mentioned Bierstadt out in Denver or whatever. I had a few
yeah,
different Dunkels when I was out there. Dude, what a killer beer style. And it's one of
yeah,
those
really good.
and it's one of those beers that kind of tears down some of those dark beer stereotypes and stuff like that in the way that like it's not it doesn't have to be a heavy beer, right? It can be a dark beer that's not all roast, right? Like heavy roast,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And again, man, you can eat that with the burger, you can eat that with pizza. You can do that. You can do that with anything, man. You know,
yeah,
and I think that's what some of those classic styles do. So that's what I geek out on. So
yeah. I do too.
yeah,
I'm looking forward to more of it. I'm looking forward to that shift. I mean, as you know, the beer scene is never stagnant. There's always somebody doing
sure.
something, whatever it is, and I'm hoping that more brewers just put one more lager on tap, or one
Yeah.
more alt or a Kolsch, or an old style that has been overlooked.
Well, and even Kolsch, I mean, Kolsch is right there as far as I mean, kind of you're borderline in that lager family, right? You're
Yeah,
borderline in that lager family with that yeast. Um,
yeah, the
but
Kolsch, the
listen,
alt.
Rockne, this is fantastic. We are 2 hours deep right now, so I'm gonna call it. Again, just like, and I'm just gonna talk to you like we're not doing a live stream. This is really great, man. I really appreciate it. I have to say, we just so everybody else knows, I'd seen Rock on and off competitions throughout the year, conferences throughout the year, and I just got back in contact with him recently, and it's really special. It's really cool. It's cool to see the people growing both personally, professionally, and it's really been awesome to reconnect with you, brother. It's been a special thing.
Likewise,
So.
likewise.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. As always, if you have any questions about what you saw, please leave them in the comments below. We're going to want to really tailor as much of this content to your questions and the things that you want to see from a behind-the-scenes standpoint here in the brewery. Also, if you feel as if you got any value out of the video, please like and subscribe. There are also other videos that you can watch. We're going to have some that are more content heavy, more informational, some a little bit more lighthearted and fun. They're going to maybe be over here or over here. Appreciate you watching.